What is up, everyone? I'm Rusty, your local laboratory maniac, and this is Ladman EDH. So, we have an issue in the EDH community. Planeswalkers kind of been typecast and have become stale. Let me summarize Planeswalker decks as a whole, describing their strategies, common cards, and the problems with them. Then we will build some decks and hopefully solve these issues so you can play Planeswalkers in a fun way. Now, put a loyalty counter on yourself and let's jump into it. So it goes kind of like this. Someone is playing Super Friends, the term used for planeswalkers. Their deck is filled with 20 or more planeswalkers, 5 to 10 board wipes, and a bunch of removal to keep the planeswalkers around. Then they ultimate the planeswalkers. This is a term used to describe a planeswalker using its last minus ability, usually either wins the game or puts you at an advantage to the point where you basically are going to win. And usually it's done the turn it's played. That's not how planeswalkers typically were designed. Each turn you try to put counters on it, and then if you last enough turns, you ultimate. But now there's things like doubling season, deep glow skate that do it almost instantly, and that's typically how the decks are built. And it's also a control based strategy that usually takes time to take their turns. They have to decide what they're going to do, but this kind of depends on the player. Speed is player associated. Beginners aren't really great at threat assessment, and so it takes a while for them to use planeswalkers, and that's another downside people don't like about them. Now, the biggest weakness of planeswalkers is that they can be attacked. So every color basically has planeswalker removal because they got creatures. And it's really sad, a really sad event when you are playing an 8 mana Ugin and they take it out with a bunch of 1/1s. So it is a feel bad situation. I'll be using the phrase super friends and planeswalkers interchangeably. They're basically the same thing. Planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering typically are heroes, but not always. Nicol Bolas. But they are usually teaming up and blah, blah, blah. So people used the old Super Friends TV show as a nickname for them. It's one of those like cartoons that were kind of ridiculous because it was made way back when. The typical color pairings for Super Friends decks are 5 colors or the black, green, white, and blue colors, Atraxa colors, and Jeskai colors with less than 5k decks on EDH for each color pairing. Here are some of the most popular commanders. Of course, Atraxa Praetor's Voice, which proliferates the loyalty counters. You got Commodore Guff, which was a pre-con. That's why Jeskai has so many decks for it. And then 5 color, the most common is Eska, God of the Tree, which her backside, the Prismatic Bridge, can cheat out planeswalkers for free from your library. Okay, just to summarize the problems, we got it's stale and it kind of ends up being a value pile deck. It's a control style, which typically is slow and people don't like that. It relies heavily on doubling season effects to ultimate planeswalkers really quickly. Planeswalkers easily are removed via combat, and it's usually 5 or 4 colors, which can kind of be a bad thing because you're just playing all the same staple cards. I think this first deck solves most of those problems. It's unique, Azorius, it's aggressive, no doubling season, of course, because it can't play doubling season. So let's just take a peek at it. Now, funny enough, it's one of my favorite decks, a deck that 2 different YouTubers have asked me about and made YouTube videos describing it. Unpopular MTG did one a few weeks ago on it, and Demo did one like 11 months, probably 12 months ago now when he was around. It's also my most viewed and liked deck on Moxville because of this. It's an what I called an animate planeswalker deck, where the goal is to turn planeswalkers into creatures. It also attempts to equip planeswalkers when they're creatures with their lore based equipments. Now, turning a planeswalker into a creature has a few benefits and weaknesses. Planeswalkers, when they're turned into creatures, can't be attacked. This isn't Yu Gi Oh!, of course, so it gets rid of the greatest downside of Planeswalkers. Second, you get to keep all the abilities, you still can only activate one loyalty ability each per turn and need loyalty counters to pay the cost, but still, you can activate all the abilities. Thirdly, You can make your planeswalkers big beaters, turning a control strategy into an aggressive one. And lastly, you can equip equipments to them. Equipments don't just give boost, they can also copy activated abilities like illusionist bracers. They can draw cards like Robe of Magi or remove stuff like Argentum armor. Same applies with ores as well. Some downsides, they do die to creature removal and board wipes. They also can die to combat damage according to whatever their toughness is at the time. If they are creatures and not planeswalkers, they don't lose loyalty counters for getting dealt damage. So keep that in mind. But it does go to their toughness. So just like a normal creature would, if their toughness goes to 0, they do die. But the loyalty counters don't get removed due to combat damage. And then second, you got to dedicate a lot of your deck to this strategy. Of course, you can put Luxior in any Planeswalker deck without dedicating the whole deck to it. However, if this is your theme, like this deck, it's hard to fit in certain cards because I'm dedicating so much to accomplish this one goal. And then third, the rules interactions that apply when you turn one permanent type into another one gets kind of weird. So you need to know your stuff about this deck. I've probably asked judges 20 different questions involving this deck before building it in paper. The commanders of the deck is Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Arden Intrepid Archaeologist. Sakashima is a 4-mana blue legendary creature human rogue. You may have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces enter as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces' other abilities. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control and has partner. It's a 3/1. And then Arden is a 3-mana white legendary creature core scout. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of ores and equipments you control to target permanent or player, and it's a 2/2. The commander choices are pretty deliberate. Sakashima can ETB as a copy of a creature I control, and if a planeswalker is a creature on my field, he will enter as a copy of it. But he will enter as a copy of the original card, not the temporary changes that now it's the planeswalker's a creature. So it won't be a creature when it enters, and my commander will become whatever planeswalker I copy. It'll look similar to this if I were to copy an animated Elspeth. Notice it's not a creature, but you could then animate your Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and win via Voltron damage, which I have killed a player like that with this deck. Same thing applies if you have Helm of the Host on an animated Planeswalker. It'll make a token copy at the beginning of combat. It will make it a copy of the Planeswalker. It's not legendary and it won't be a creature because it doesn't create a copy of the temporary status of that creature Planeswalker. I've had 3 of the same Gideons on the field with this move. Now, something I wanted to point out with Arden. So, Arden lets you attach equipment or auras to target permanent or player. Doesn't have to be a creature. So, when I first built this deck, I thought, hey, I could play Luxior, Giada's Gift, which is a 1-mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it. Then, equipped permanent isn't a planeswalker and is a creature in addition to its other types. And then it has equipped planeswalker 1 or equipped 3. Now, I thought I could just attach Luxior to a Planeswalker, but you cannot do that because equipped Planeswalker is different from equipped. This is the only card with equipped Planeswalker, sadly enough. They should make more, of course, but just keep that in mind. You cannot target at the beginning of combat one of your Planeswalkers to be equipped with Luxior unless they're already a creature. There are other ways in Azorius Colors to animate a Planeswalker outside of Luxior, although that is our main one, like I said. One of the best is Sparkshaper Visionary, which is a 3-mana blue human wizard. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose any number of target Planeswalkers you control. Until your end of turn, they become a 3/3 blue bird creature with flying, hexproof, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you scry 1, and it's a 0/5. Then you can also go the animate artifact route. Liquid Metal Torque can turn a Planeswalker into an artifact. There's also Liquid Metal Coating. I don't have that in the deck, but you could throw it in there. Then you got stuff like Karn the Great Creator, which of course is a Planeswalker, but it can animate a artifact and give it power and toughness equal to its CMC. Then, once your planeswalker is a temporary creature, either through Luxior, Spark Shaper, whatever, you can make it permanently a creature by mutating onto it. Mutate is an ability that has an alternate cost. For example, Sea Dasher Octopus is a 3 mana blue octopus. It has Mutate for 2, as Flash. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and it's a 2/2. When you mutate, you decide to have it on top or under the target. They look what if you look at the screen, that is what it'll look like depending on how you do it. But no matter what you do, the creature will have all the abilities. However, the difference is if you do the mutate creature on top, it'll only have the creature, for example, in this case, creature octopus type line. It will not have the planeswalker type line, so it won't be a planeswalker. If you do Sea Dasher on the bottom, it'll have the legendary planeswalker, Elspeth, or whatever it is, type, and not the creature type. Obviously, you'd want the octopus on top for deck purposes for this deck. That way, it can't be attacked. And if they remove Luxior or your temporary, turning it into an artifact or a creature with the Spark Hunter, that won't affect it anymore. It'll be permanently a creature. Now, let's say you have made Tezzeret the Seeker a creature with Luxior, the turn you played it, and then with 4 loyalty counter on it, you use Sea Dasher Octopus to mutate it. So now it's only a creature. Its base power is 2/2, and it gets +4/+4 with Luxior. So you have a 6/6 with all of its loyalty abilities, essentially. Then you play Sakashima of 1,000 Faces from your command zone. What happens? Well, it will become a copy of the Sea Dasher with Sakashima of 1,000 Faces on it won't have that name, but it'll still be considered your commander, and it has all activated abilities of Tezzeret the Seeker and Sea Dasher Octopus as well. And it will be a 2/2 with 0 loyalty ability. You can activate its loyalty abilities, of course, but it starts at 0. It's still your commander. Mutating is a copyable ability, unlike temporary creature status for a planeswalker. So if you mutate your commander, it'll still trigger any mutate trigger abilities as well. Here is a visual for that situation, and on the right, that's what it would look like. Now, the last interesting trick, let's say you have an animated planeswalker. Let's say Sakashima is a copy of Elspeth again. Then you play one with the stars, which says enchant creature or enchantment. Enchanted permanent is an enchantment and loses all other types. What happens? Well, it loses all other card types as well. It doesn't become an enchantment in addition. So it's just an enchantment. It can't die to creature removal, or it can't be attacked by creatures. So it loses the weaknesses of a creature and it loses the weaknesses of a planeswalker. It's going to be really hard for your opponent to interact. So you can hopefully ultimate this a lot easier. Red, black, and blue will have very little options. Obviously, green and white have a lot of enchantment removal, but still, it'll help protect your planeswalker. And I just thought it was an interesting interaction. Now, I have 10 tutors to get Luxior out, the best card to target for this deck. You got your Stoneforge Mystic, Fabricate, Trinket Mage, Open the Army. There's a lot of cool ways to get it. Then I have plenty of ways to recur it. You got Nahiri, Archangel Elspeth, Triumph Reckoning, Academy Ruins, Mistfell Plains tucks it back into your library so you can tutor it again. Buried Ruins gets it back to your hand. Plenty of options. You can copy Luxior. It is legendary though, so you need your commander Sakashima out because he kind of gets rid of the legend rule, which is another reason why I chose him. The Mycosynth Gardens is a land that can copy an artifact, and Masterwork of Ingenuity can come in as a copy of an equipment. Now, lastly, I did a flavor over function thing. I wanted to put the lore-based weaponry that these planeswalkers used in the stories and then equip them with it. For example, Archangel Elspeth has Godsend, Shadow Spear, and Luxior. Gideon Blackblade obviously has Blackblade Reforged. Now, funny story, I actually blocked a Heliod with an Elspeth with a Spear and removed its indestructible to kill it, which happened in the lore, which is pretty cool. Now, you don't have to do this. This is flavor purposes. You can take these cards out and put something else, but it is an equipment themed deck, and Arden lets you equip these for free. An additional thing you could do is add more colors to the deck and play around with. I've probably built at least 10 versions of an Animate Planeswalker deck in various colors. If you go to Mir or Jeskai, you can actually have a mutate creature directly in the command zone. This frees up space in your deck if you wanted to. Illuna, Apex of Wishes, lets you cheat stuff out from top of your library, so it actually helps you cheat out other planeswalkers. Vadrock Apex of Thunder can let you recast Luxior if it goes to the graveyard because it lets you cast something when it mutates that costs 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If you do end up adding red, Sarkhan the Masterless becomes either the first or second best way to animate planeswalkers, depending on how you look at it. He is a 5 mana red planeswalker. He has, whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. And then has a +1, which is the most important one. It says, until end of turn, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. And the -3 is create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying, and it starts at 5 loyalty. So the Planeswalker becomes a creature, you mutate it, bang bada boom, you're made in the shade. It also has a really cool anime style art if you wanted to use that. And don't worry, later in this video, I actually have a full anime Super Friends deck for you. Having red also lets you have stuff like Bludgeon Brawl, which is a 3 mana red enchantment. Each non creature, non equipment artifact is an equipment with equip X. An equipped creature gets +X/+0, where X is that artifact's converted mana cost. This gets kind of weird because you can actually make a Planeswalker artifact and then equip a Planeswalker creature with a Planeswalker. Or you can just get one of the typical like Pyromancer's goggles, equip that to Chandra dressed in to kill, and bing bada boom, you kind of just dressed her up to literally kill. Okay, one last fun trick to go with animating planeswalkers thing, and then I'm done, I swear. Got plenty more planeswalker decks for you. People just have been asking me about this, and I wanted to make sure that people had a thorough explanation. Now, this next one involves an avatar card. Now, I know what you're thinking. Animating a planeswalker is a little too mainstream for me. We need something even weirder, even more unique. All right, all right. Try turning a planeswalker into a land. We can do that. Step one, you play Princess Yue as a commander, or potentially a secret commander, depending on what colors. But if you do mono blue, it could be your commander. It's a 3 mana blue legendary creature, human noble ally. When it dies, if she was a non-land creature, return this card to the battlefield tapped under your control. She's a land named Moon and gains the ability to tap for colorless. And then she has the tap ability to scry 2, and she's a 3/2. Now, step two, you have her in play. Play a clone to copy the princess. Then, state based actions require that you get rid of one. Well, you get rid of the clone, which is a copy, of course, of the princess. And that triggers the clone's copied ability to return it to the battlefield tapped under your control. It's a land named Moon, and she gains tap, the colorless, all that stuff. However, the clone needs to enter as a copy of a creature as it is brought back. So clone re-enters as a copy of, let's say, Jace Beleren equipped with Luxior. It becomes a legendary land, and it taps for colorless and has each of Jace's abilities. So it makes it so it's not a planeswalker, obviously, it's just a land, and it gains you so much value. It's a few hoops to jump through, but the end result is pretty powerful. So clone re-enters as a copy of, let's say, and focusing on planeswalkers with static abilities are going to be your greatest bet here. There are 12 in our color pairing here in mono blue that you can choose. Got ones that let you play your loyalty abilities at instant speed, that let you cast colorless spells for 2 less, that prevent opponents from drawing more than 1 card, exile something when you cast a colorless spell, and the list goes on. This next deck idea will prevent your deck from being stale, a common problem with Planeswalkers because it actually plays differently each time. It's a deck I've talked about in the past, so I'm going to be pretty brief. It plays differently because it's two decks for one. Let me explain. I had a mono blue Super Friends deck around Jace, specifically Jace Friends Prodigy as the commander. I threw in the most Jace things that I possibly could. All his R, even the basic lands had Jace on it. I don't know if you're looking at the screen, but can you see Jace way in the background? This is actually right after he fought Nicol Bolas, and Nicol Bolas essentially wiped his mind. No, I wanted to do to my opponents what Jace and Nicol Bolas do to their opponents, mentally traumatize them. Traumatize is a card in the deck. It's a 5 mana blue sorcery. Target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded down into his or her graveyard. I put literally every mill half of their library as I could. There's actually quite a few nowadays in mono blue that mills half your opponent's library. Then I added every double miller that I could in the deck as well. Fraying Sanity is a perfect example and right on theme. It's a 3 mana blue or a curse. Enchant player, at the beginning of each end step, enchanted player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards put into that graveyard from anywhere this turn. Then, of course, I had all 15 Jaces in the deck. Now, come on now, how do we have 15 Jaces, but my boy Davriel only gets one and it's an uncommon? Come on, the injustice. Anyway, so I had that deck in Jace Super Friends mill deck basically. But then in the story, Jace gets turned into a Phyrexian. Well, now I wanted to make it a deck with Phyrexian Jace as the theme. Okay, that requires some shifting around. I ended up replacing about 25 cards of the deck, about a quarter of the deck. I made the commander Tecuthal Inquiry Dominus, which is a 4 mana blue Phyrexian Horror, as flying. If you proliferate twice instead, and then you can pay 3, remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers you control, put an indestructible counter on Tecuthal, and it's a 3/5. Although I didn't really focus on the infect strategy, but there are a few cards naturally that have infect in here. Mainly the proliferate was to ultimate my super friends faster, get my Jaces off fast. Well, that okay, don't say it like that, but to make them ultimate faster. I did remove the mill strategy in favor for this. I also swapped out some of the islands. Now I got Phyrexian islands in the deck. But after I made the deck, Jace goes back to being a normal planeswalker. He's not a Phyrexian anymore. Come on, that's the coolest thing to ever happen to him. Why did they switch it? I'm not sure. They just want to keep Jace non-Phyrexian so the Phyrexians don't spread. They're supposed to be contained. And he literally got rid of the Phyrexian virus just by thinking about it. No magically cool way to save himself and his romantic interest, Vraska. He just was like, well, if I think hard enough, my body will fight off the infection. Sweet, just like that, it's all over. And just some lore theory for you, Vraska and Jace have a kid now, Tam Mindful First Year, allegedly. Now, I wonder if he got Vraska pregnant just by thinking about it instead of doing it the fun way. Probably did it with the whole reality fracture thing. Okay, crash out done, crash out done. Okay, what are we going to be doing with this Jace deck? Well, I still had 30 or so cards for my normal Jace deck, but I liked my normal Jace deck, and I liked the Phyrexian Jace deck. So what I did is I just kept one as a sideboard. I got some extra matching sleeves, and so I just keep it together. If my opponents say, "Hey, I want to play a game," I say, okay, I'll be Phyrexian Jace right now, or I'll be the regular mill telepathy kind of Jace right now. It just depends. It doesn't get stale, and you can change it depending on your opponent's preferences. It's a really versatile way to do it. But you don't have to go the Jace route if you don't want. There's 7 planeswalkers that were made into Phyrexians in the Phyrexian All Will Be One storyline. Ajani and Nissa are probably the more reasonable ones. They have the most amount of lore, most amount of cards that you can fit into the deck. But you can also choose another planeswalker who didn't turn in the lore. Maybe you can turn them. Maybe you can make a mono red Super Friends deck with Chandra and have a sideboard of Infect related cards. I've actually built red Infect before. If you want a deck list, I can give it to you. Just comment down below. If you need help with ideas for this, you can add me on Discord. I'd be glad to work with you. And now the benefit of red Infect in Super Friends is you only need to do 10 damage instead of 40, so burning is a lot easier. Okay, let's take the typical Super Friends commander, Essica, and make it a little more unique. Now, I told you Super Friends is a term that they use for planeswalkers, but for this deck, I'm actually using the phrase Teen Titans. This is my Teen Titans deck, and I own this one in paper because all of the planeswalkers are 3 CMC or lower, except for one. Now, Essica, God of the Tree, is a 3 mana green god. As Vigilance, you can tap her to add 1 mana of any color, and then other legendary creatures you control have Vigilance and they tap to add 1 mana of any color. And then she flips into the Prismatic Bridge, which I'm sure you know about. It's a Wooburg enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards on the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Gone are the days that planeswalkers are high CMC. Unironically, there are 69 planeswalkers with 3 CMC or less as their casting costs. That does include a few creatures that turn into planeswalkers, but still. So, what are the benefits on focusing on a low CMC planeswalker style of deck? They aren't nearly as threatening. Most planeswalkers have a crazy into the ultimate kind of thing, but most of these do not. So your opponent might leave them alone. Some even help your opponents, like Jace Beleren, that lets them draw a card. They won't attack into you, risking losing their creatures, especially if you have blockers, just to get rid of Jace Beleren or something. They won't do it. Another benefit is that you can spam them out a lot quicker and your overall investment is lower. So when one is taken out, it's easier to replace and less of a loss for you. Spamming them out also lets you benefit when you're playing a lot of cards that say, whenever you cast a non creature spell, do X, Y, and Z. Whirlwind of Thought is an example that lets you draw the card every time you cast one. Shark Typhoon gets you flying shark tokens when you do. There's plenty of cards that do this. Prowess is another ability that benefits from it. Just any non creature, not the instant and sorcery, those are the most common. You got to search for non creature spell. Another benefit is they do what we want to do anyway. For example, Domri, Anarch of Bolas, gets you mana, while Kyora, Behemoth Beckoner gets you mana and also draws you cards. It gets you mana by untapping lands, but still. And these cards, your mana ramp, your draw package, are really good for this deck. They also make winning with the one planeswalker with a higher than 3 CMC in the whole deck. That's right, the Teen Titans Justice League member on babysitting duty is Shark in the Masterless. I'm not sure what Justice League member he would be. He's definitely not Batman or Superman. He seems like an Aquaman kind of guy. But anyway, he makes all of them 4/4 flying red dragons, like I mentioned earlier. And since you're spamming them out quickly, you'll hopefully have a bunch. Planeswalker decks have high CMC, high mana curves, since the average Planeswalker actually costs around 5 CMC. You lower the curve, the more efficient the deck will be, obviously. Like I said, I own this in paper. Yes, I have a lot of Planeswalkers deck. Don't shame me, okay? You guys are supposed to be on my side here. Now, when I play it, I find that I play the Essica side of it, not the back side, because getting the top Planeswalker from your library isn't as effective with if all of them are like 3 CMC. But mana ramping into her front side is beneficial, lets you start double casting Planeswalkers as early as turn 3. Now, my Planeswalker deck Titans do want to be real adult super friends one day. So I did throw in the Enchant Planeswalker cycle into this deck. There are a series of 5, one of each color. They have Enchant Planeswalker and then give additional abilities. For example, Liliana's Talent is a 2 mana black aura. You enchant the Planeswalker. Enchanted Planeswalker has -8. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. And whenever a creature deals damage to an enchanted planeswalker, destroy that creature. You also have Elspeth's talent, which is a 4 mana white aura. Enchant Planeswalker. The Enchanted Planeswalker has +1, create 3/1/1 white soldier creature tokens. And then whenever you activate the loyalty ability of Enchanted Planeswalker, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Now, speaking of Super Friends and Teen Titans, let's talk about a deck that I made that isn't technically complete yet. I do have a deck list. I haven't made it in paper and tried it out, though. It is a more casual build, okay? Just keep that in mind. It's more casual. But if you have any ideas on how to kind of hone it, let me know. I call it the Justice Friends deck. If you aren't familiar, it's a party of super friends but like super dumb. It's like a parody. It's actually from Dexter's Laboratory, the TV show. Although a reference to the DC show, it uses parodies of Marvel characters like Captain America, Thor, Hulk. There are a series of planeswalkers that came in standard pre-constructed decks. They're called planeswalker decks. They're now out of print, but they had some interesting cards. They typically would have a face planeswalker card and then an associated card that tutors for it. For example, Garruk Savage Herald and Garruk Ward Steed. Now, the planeswalkers were basically parodies of their normal cards, kind of dumbed down versions and weaker for newer players. And then the cool thing about the cards that tutor for the planeswalkers is it not just only tutors from the deck, but also from the graveyard. And that's where we're going to be working with the most. That's a very unique ability. 13 of those planeswalkers were associated with creatures. Some had, you know, cards that tutored for them that were instants and sorceries or enchantments or artifacts, but we want to focus and hone in on the creature ones. So we will use these two cards here on the screen as our secret commanders for the deck. Sneak Attack is a common one. It's a 4 mana red enchantment that lets you play 1 red mana to put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste, and then you sacrifice it at the end of turn. Then there's Planebound Apprentice, which is a sneak attack for planeswalkers. It's a 3 mana red human wizard. You pay a 1 red. You may put a planeswalker card from your hand onto the battlefield, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, and it's a 1/3. Now, this typically is not played because you don't want your planeswalkers to go to the graveyard. You want them to stay on the battlefield so they ultimate, but our deck's going to be a little different. So let me build the board for you. You sneak out Garruk's War Steed with Sneak Attack. It tutors out for Garruk. Then you take Garruk out with Planebound Apprentice to activate its ability, so you have both on the field. At the end of turn, you have to sacrifice both. But this actually brings us into our next strategy for this deck. You can use blink effects, which reactivate your creature based searches, and you can also use second sunrise effects like Cosmic Intervention, which is a 4 mana white instant. If a permanent you control would be put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, exile it instead. Return it to the battlefield under the owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and then you can foretell it for 2. Then you got stuff that's constantly bringing back creatures at your upkeep, like Debtor's Kneel. It brings a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield every upkeep. You can choose the Planeswalker creature, of course, that tutors out the Planeswalker back from your graveyard to your hand. Then you can cheat it out again for 1 red mana, and you just keep doing that temporary value repetitively, and hopefully you'll win the game. Now, of course, you can have doubling season in this deck, so you can ultimate your Planeswalker each turn, which will be pretty powerful. Now, although it's a very unique deck idea, you're going to need 5 colors for this to work. Essica is a great one, as you know, but Kindreth for this one would be the best option in my opinion. And that's because it has its last ability that lets you pay 5 mana, 1 black, and recur a creature from the graveyard. So for 5 mana, you can retutor for your planeswalker because you're bringing back the creature tutor, put it back into your hand, then bring it out again. Of course, you can go the double season strategy. You can go the deep glow skate strategy, especially since we're going to be doing some flickering and all that. Or you can do something like Resourceful Defense. It's a 3 mana white enchantment. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, you may put those counters on target permanent you control. Then you can pay 5 for move any number of counters from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. So it can easily take those counters that were on that sacrifice planeswalker, put it on something else and save it for later, or put it on another planeswalker that's sticking around for longer than one turn. 4 and 5 colors are the most popular color pairing, like we said. But what if we actually did the exact opposite? What if we went completely colorless? Could we make a planeswalker deck for this? Now, some of you regular viewers will recognize this deck from my Patreon, Who's Neil. He came up with it. All credit comes to him. He asked me to build this deck for him for a Patreon deck build request. And I actually built it in paper as well. I liked it so much. I haven't played with it just yet because I just built it though. The commander is my boy here, Karn Silver Golem, which is a 5 mana legendary artifact creature. Whenever he blocks or becomes blocked, he gets -4/+4 until end of turn. Then you can pay 1. Target non-creature artifact is an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its casting cost until end of turn, and it's a 4/4. We are going to be doing the Super Friends thing, of course, but we're also doing a Turbo Fog strategy, which works really well with Planeswalkers because it helps protect them. But also, this is kind of a lore based strategy because Karn is a pacifist in the lore, and that's one of the requests that Who's Neil made when I was designing this deck. So we don't want to do any damage to our opponents, and we definitely don't want to take any damage. There are a bunch of ways in colorless to fog, like Scarecrow, which is a 5 mana artifact creature. You pay 6, tap it until end of turn. All damage done to you by flying creatures is reduced to 0, and it's a 2/2. Now, there's about 10 planeswalkers in the colorless pair. Yeah, 10. That's insane. Here's 8 of them. 4 are Karns, 3 are Ugins. You got a Tezzeret, you got the Aether Spark. It'd be hilarious, actually, to give Karn Silver Golem the Aether Spark to attach it and make him a Planeswalker. Now, the Planeswalkers, I won't go over every single one. They do removal, they draw, they make tokens, they tutor, they animate artifacts, they cheat out permanents. You name it, they can do it. They're so functional. Now, you got bunch of fogs. I don't have them all listed here, but here's just 8 that I can kind of describe. Horn of Deafening, Pentagram of Ages, and Mourner's Shield. Pay mana and tap to fog a target creature. Alabar's Carpet taps for 5 mana to prevent all damage done to you by attacking non-flyers. So it's the exact opposite of Scarecrow. Bubble Matrix makes all damage dealt to creatures 0. Orb of Warding makes you hexproof and prevents 1 damage every time a creature would deal damage to you. So it kind of hoses tokens. The One Ring gives you protection on ETB, but you know that. You've all faced the One Ring. Force Field reduces all damage dealt to you by creatures to 1 by paying 1 generic mana. For win cons, you have a few options here that don't involve combat. First, I really want to win with Karn Liberated's Ultimate. He's a 7 mana planeswalker with 3 abilities. His +4 is target player exiles a card from his or her hand. -3 is exile target permanent. And -14 is you restart the game, leaving in all exiled permanents. I love that. And so basically, the way it'll probably go is your opponent will just scoop. They probably don't want to restart the game, especially if you have a bunch of stuff exiled under Karn. Of course, you have other options like the Millennium Calendar. It's a 1 mana legendary artifact. When you untap 1 or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Then you can pay to tap it, double the number of time counters on it. And then when there are 1,000 or more time counters on it, you sacrifice it and each opponent loses 1,000 life. Another win con that would be 100% flavorful is a poison counter strategy. This is because Karn carried the Phyrexian plane to Mirrodin, which is a plane that he created. Virulent Silencer is really good for this, and definitely not a Xenomorph look-alike. It's a 3 mana artifact creature, Robot Assassin. Whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters, and it's a 2/3. Infect and Planeswalkers are two strategies that love proliferate, so I threw in a bunch of it in this deck, like Karn's Bastion. It's a land that taps for colors, but you can also pay for generic and tap it to proliferate. Now, let's take a shift in strategy here. What if we took another archetype that's pretty popular, like Aristocrats, and make it Planeswalker themed? I am talking about sacrificing our Planeswalkers for value. And what Planeswalker to watch die over and over and over again other than Gideon? Now, there are 8 Gideons that turn themselves into creatures that we will use. Since planeswalkers do have counters, and they'll be creatures when we sacrifice them for our aristocrat strategy, we can choose Felisa Fang of Silverquill as the commander. It's a 4-mana Orzhov legendary creature vampire wizard. Has flying, has mentor. When a non-token creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, create X tapped 2/1 white and blank inkling creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of counters it had on it. It's a 3/2. So you would get a bunch of tokens every time you sacrificed a Gideon or any kind of planeswalker that you animate. And we can do even more with the counters. We can move them onto the Ozolith when the creature dies. That's right, you can move loyalty counters onto the Ozolith if it's a creature, and then put them onto another Gideon on the beginning of combat that you have animated, stacking them and reusing them. But what if you also had a resourceful defense and an Ozolith? What happens there? Well, the way they read is kind of misleading. If it had counters on it, put those counters on, kind of sounds like you just move the counters from that creature onto that object. But that's not how it goes. You're actually recreating those counters and putting it onto that permanent. So if you have 2 out, it'll actually double the net amount of counters. If you have 5 on Gideon, he dies, you put 5 on the Ozolith, and then 5 on another permanent thanks to resourceful defense. There are a series of creatures that do something similar to the Ozolith. Reluctant Role Model is one of them. It's a 2-mana white human survivor. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Reluctant Role Model is tapped, put a flying lifelink or +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever it or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature, and it's a 2/2. And when we sacrifice the planeswalker, we can bring them back in various ways. I talked about Cosmic Intervention earlier, but you can also do Brought Back, which is a 2-mana white instant. Choose up to 2 target permanent cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn, or return them to the battlefield tapped. Something that can be repetitive because Brought Back is really just a temporary thing. It's a one-shot instant. You can do Enduring Renewal, which is a 4-mana white enchantment. Play with your hand revealed. And if you would draw a card, reveal the top card of your library instead. If it's a creature card, put into your graveyard. Otherwise, draw a card. Whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you return it to your hand, which is pretty good. Because we can constantly return those Gideons back to our hand, recast it over and over. You could also give the Planeswalkers Persist with Cauldron of Souls, so it keeps coming back with an extra counter on it. That means more Inkling tokens in the end. And then you can also sacrifice, we're going to do the normal sacrificing stuff. There's plenty of sack outlets that you benefit from. But one of the best ones, actually, I guess not technically a sacrifice outlet, but it kind of acts like that, is the Elder Spell. It's a 2-mana black sorcery. Destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control. Put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. But we can get even weirder with it. What about a food-based aristocrat style deck? The commander for this one is Bernard Ginger Sculptor. And let me just say, if you thought turning a planeswalker into a land was weird, you're going to be baffled by this deck. He is a 4-mana Bant legendary creature human artificer. Each creature you control that's a food or a golem gets +2/+2 and has trample. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 food golem artifact creature in addition to its other types, and has pay 2, tap it, sacrifice this artifact. You gain 3 life, and it starts as a 3/3. Okay, so we get our sacrifice outlet greater good that lets us sack a creature, draw cards equal to its power, and then discard 3 cards. So Gideon would go to the graveyard as a creature, triggering the commander's ability to return him back to the field. So you will have a 1/1 legendary planeswalk artifact creature, Gideon Food Golem. And since it's both a planeswalker and a creature, any damage dealt to it will both remove loyalty counters and be marked against its toughness. Should you activate the +1, then it becomes a 5/5 planeswalker artifact creature, Gideon Food Golem, human soldier ally until end of turn. Having the planeswalker and creature type is a weakness for sure, but since we are making token copies, we can do stuff to prevent the legendary rule and then double them with stuff like parallel lives or populate abilities like Druid's Deliverance. That's a fog and it populates, so it's extra good. Also, the Ozolith can make them ultimate pretty fast if you move counters around like I had in the other deck. As a meme, you could throw in Embiggen, which is a 1 mana green instant. Until end of turn, target non-brushwag creature gets +1/+1 for each super type, card type, and subtype it has. So if you have Gideon Food Champion out here, you can animate him with his ability and then give him +9/+9, making him huge for 1 mana. Now, all jokes aside, with this strategy, you can throw in some of the good food stuff, but I will take note that Academy Manufacturer, with our commander's ability, would actually not make Gideon Champion of Justice food golem token. It would make just a regular food. So keep that in mind when you're deck building. Now, lastly, this is also definitely a weird one. This has to be the most weird deck building video I've ever done with the most unique decks I've ever done, and they're all Planeswalker related. But anyway, so Jessica is a popular color pairing, like I said, the most popular 3 color pairing for Planeswalkers, mainly due to that Planeswalker pre-con deck that came out. So let's go a different route with Jeskai, trying to make it more interesting. And this is actually an anime art focused deck, fitting as many anime art cards in the deck as we can for flavor purposes, but also keep it functional as well. There are actually 60 Planeswalker cards with anime art, or you know, what you consider anime art. There's like the Chibi Planeswalker. I don't know if you'd consider that anime art. I do, but still. Quick Magic the Gathering history lore. The first anime art in all Magic the Gathering was first in the Dual Decks Jace versus Chandra sold in Japan. I actually got it at a flea market when I was in high school. Can you tell me which Jace in Chandra that this is on the screen? It had Jace Bellerin and Chandra Nalar. And that kind of brings the issue with this deck that I've been running into playing this deck. Yes, this is another deck I own in paper. Yeah. Have a bunch of Planeswalker decks. Because I had a whole bunch of anime cards that I could barely read. And, I wanted to throw them all in one deck. But you have to know the cards inside and out, especially if you don't read Japanese. After that dual deck, there was 11 years later after, in fact, they came out with War of the Spark, and it had 18 planeswalkers with traditional anime art. Now, there's different styles, like I said. Some are secret layer versions, some are champion promos, like Basri here, and then some are just different art styles that came out in regular sets, like the Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh. Now, that Tamio Moon Sage there is obviously the chibi version. They've come out with 2 chibi Planeswalker secret layers. I'm waiting for them to come out with 2 more, and you can make a chibi Planeswalker style deck. Now, I built this deck when Strixhaven originally came out. And for a commander, I used Elsha of the Infinite because I'm dealing with a lot of non creatures. It wasn't technically anime, but there was no anime commander I could choose at the time. But now they have hundreds of anime related cards. all the way up to 5 color. Miku, Child of Song, is a Child of Alara reprint, but with a different face, an anime art style face. Now, I haven't updated mine. I might make it 5 color with Child of Alara, or sorry, Child of Song Miku as the commander. But for right now, I have Alicia of the Infinite, which is a 5 mana and Jeskai legendary creature, Jin Monk, as prowess. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast non-creature spells from the top of your library. If you cast a spell this way, you may cast it as though it had flash, and it's a 3/3. Strixhaven came out with a bunch of instants and sorceries that had anime art, like Day of Judgment here. There's also champion promos from Japan, like Farewell, that I have on the right screen here. Now, I started building this because of Roy the Spark came out a little bit before Strixhaven, and I had all these arts. I just threw them all together, and it functions perfectly. So in function, it is a spell slinger planeswalker style kind of a deck. It focuses on cards that emphasize planeswalkers and instants and sorceries. So cards like not that say non-creature like Ikamoon Gauntlet are pretty good for it. It's a 3 mana blue artifact. Planeswalkers you control have pay 0, proliferate, or a -12. Take an extra turn after this one. Then, whenever you cast a non creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. And of course, it has Tameo getting turned into a Phyrexian on the art. You gotta love it. And then there's a bunch of cards that get us tokens when we cast something like Ovika Enigma Goliath, which is a 7 mana, is it legendary creature, Phyrexian Nightmare. Has flying, has ward 3, pay 3 life. And then whenever you cast a non creature spell, create X/1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens, where X is the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn, and it's a 6/6. Now, I ended up with 54 anime cards in the deck, a little over 50% of it. Even some of the basics and some of the mana ramp have anime art. Overall, the power level, it isn't the strongest, but it is flavorful and fully functional. Nowadays, staples like Rhystic Study, Land Tax, and Soul Ring have anime arts that I have yet to throw in there. I haven't updated the deck in about a year or two. There's plenty of room to grow if you wanted to build this strategy. Thanks for watching until the end of the video. Quick shout out to my paid patrons Who'snail, Brooke, Brody, and Matt. I appreciate your support. Do you think we addressed some of the issues with Planeswalker decks in EDH? Do you find any of these decks unique, interesting, or are they too far off the beaten path? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.